Hi, this is Nahid, and welcome to our third video in our 3-video series, Tapping into the Hidden Job Market. If you haven't seen the other 2 videos yet, the first one defined the hidden job market and talked to you about what it was. And then the second video talked a little bit about how to think of yourself so that you can emotionally prepare to tap into the hidden job market, so you kind of have an idea of how you want to tap into it and who you want to meet. So once you have a general idea of who you want to network with or become friends with, now we'll go to your action plan. What I've created is a step-by-step action plan, and you don't have to follow it exactly. I mean, use the parts of it that you resonate with, and the parts of it that you don't resonate with, don't worry about. This I designed for my clients that just wanted something very, very tangible to follow. Here are your steps. So the first thing you're going to do is, based on your general idea of the kind of people that you want to be making friends with, you are going to research and make a list of potential people. And this is an ongoing part of your process. So you may only find 3 people. You can go ahead and start your process with those 3 people as you continue on. Now, there's lots of ways to do this. Sometimes it's make a list of companies and go onto the websites of those companies and see if you can find people. Go onto LinkedIn and see if you can find people that work for those companies. See if you can find anyone that works at that company that can give you names. So it's sort of a long process of making a list. But once you've made a list and you have the contact information, then you'll go to step 2. Step 2 is to design your 10-step introduction process. And what I mean by a 10-step introduction process is that there are 10 contacts that you will make. And that comes from the idea that people don't even see messages from people. They don't even register it until they've seen it for around 7 times. That comes from sort of standard marketing knowledge base. So I went up a few contacts to 10 just to make sure we have that covered. So you're going to design a 10-step introduction process, and I've designed a 10-step introduction process so you can follow that one, or you can change it to sort of meet your style and line up with your style a little bit better. What you'll be doing in this introduction process is you'll be asking for a meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to introduce yourself and to get to know the person a little bit better, to see if it would make sense for you to be in their pipeline. What do I mean by being in their pipeline? Being in their pipeline is that they have a file folder, let's just say, of resumes of people who they might be able to reach out to should they have a need at some point in the future. And this is a really valuable thing to offer somebody, because if I'm a busy manager, the last thing I want to do is to decide that I need some help and then not immediately have some people that I can reach out to, because otherwise I have to go through the whole job search process, and that just takes too long because I needed my help yesterday. So that's the idea. That's how you're tapping into the hidden job market, is you're making friends with people who might have a need at some point, and you want your name to be in their head and very handy if they do have a need. And that way you can come in on a project basis, you can come in temporarily, you can even come in and interview for a job if they're at that point. But the idea is you want to be there in their mind before they do anything official. You're going to be asking for a meeting, and this is not a job interview. So you should prepare for that meeting. And a little bit later, I'll explain exactly what you're going to do in that meeting. But you should also expect little to no response, because typically people don't respond to unsolicited reach outs. That doesn't mean that those reach outs are not getting you leverage. Once you've reached out to someone a few times, they're going to recognize your name. And I have to tell you this from personal experience. I get solicited all the time. And people who use the same names, I start recognizing their names, even though I'm just going through their emails and going delete, delete, delete. Now, you're not going to be as obnoxious as some of the people that reach out to me, but your name will get recognized even if somebody does not call you back. You're not going to expect response, but you're going to be ready if you do get a response. Okay, so you'll prepare for a meeting and we'll tell you how to do that in your steps. The thing to keep in mind is this really isn't a selling yourself process. I mean, it is a selling yourself process, but it isn't an obnoxious, pushy selling yourself process. I think a lot of people just shy away from this because they think they're going to be annoying people. And I am the last person who wants to annoy people that I'm trying to get to know. So I've designed this entire process to be very useful and helpful to people as opposed to annoying. It's not a pushy process. So that means it's not a short-term process. It's not going in there and say, hey, I can help you, hire me today. It's not that at all. It's more, hey, I'm wanting to be more strategic about my job search. I identified your company. I identified you. I don't know if we'd be a fit at any time in the future, but I wanted to explore that. And I really appreciate you taking the time to get to know me, taking a look at my resume, keeping it on file just in case anything might come up in the future. People respect that. And actually, people love that. Can you imagine if you're a busy manager and you often have need for graphic designers, that a graphic designer comes in and said, hey, I want to introduce myself. Here's my portfolio. I just want to let you know that I'm around and I'm available and I am personally interested in working for your company. So if a project ever comes up, please call me. I would love that because basically I have resources falling at my feet and I don't have to do any effort to get those resources. So that's how you want to think of this process. You don't want to think about it as being pushy and imposing yourself on people that don't have time. Because if you do that, you're not going to do the process, which is understandable. It's understandable to face the fear. But if you can change your thinking about it, you can do it and you can do it well. And people will be really, really happy that you reached out to them. So keep in mind that getting to know people, even when you're looking for a job, it doesn't have to be pushy. All right, let's talk very specifically about the 10-step interaction process. So typically what I recommend is you start with an introductory email and you include your resume. Then you go to snail mail and you send a follow-up letter that includes your resume. Then you do a phone call follow-up, which is likely going to be a voicemail, and it's just a did you receive it? Then you have a request to connect on LinkedIn, let's say. You don't want to do that too early in the process because you want them to sort of recognize your name by the time you're asking them to connect on LinkedIn. Then maybe you do an email follow-up. Now that's 5. Then maybe you wait 1 or 2 months and you repeat that entire sequence. So that already gets you to 10. But then if you want a couple more, you do a final phone call, final voicemail, final email. And every 4 months, then you continue to reach out with maybe an email or a call. So all of your communication is polite and honest. So here is an example of an introductory email. Hi, John. I wanted to reach out because I help keep on top of marketing lead generation, and I've targeted your organization as a place I'd like to work. In case you anticipate any needs now or in the future for someone to help in marketing, I'd love to have you keep my resume on file. And if you have the time and are willing, I'd love to stop by and introduce myself as a potential resource. Thanks for your consideration. And if you'd be willing to set up a short meeting, you can reach me at this number or this email. That's a very polite email. It's very honest. And John can decide. But even if John doesn't respond to you at all, John's going to remember your name, and John now has your email. Now, John may just be very busy and he might be scrolling through email. He might just read this really fast and go on. He might just scan it really fast and move on and not even look at your resume. That's okay because you're going to be having a second and a third and a fourth follow-up. So let's say you have a follow-up. Now, this could be an email or this could be in your snail mail. Hi, John. I wanted to reach out one more time to see if you received my resume and if you'd be willing to schedule a short meeting to see if I could be a potential resource to you now or sometime in the future. I've attached my resume again, and here's my contact information if you'd be willing to schedule a short meeting. Notice I'm using things like if and if you'd be willing, and I would love to. You're being completely honest about what you're looking for, but you're also being very respectful. And not once are you doing the strategy of saying, I will call you in 2 weeks to set up an appointment. We're not following that very aggressive strategy, because pushy is not what's here. You're inviting, you're offering, you're not pushing. And I think for some of you, this is going to line up with your value system a lot more than some of those other techniques that are a little bit more aggressive. While this technique is not aggressive, it's persistent and it's polite, and it's going to start your personal brand with this person, whether they know it or not, because the tone of your email is polite and professional, yet you're doing something that takes a lot of bravery. So you're going to be developing a brand that says that you're resourceful, that you're creative, that you're assertive, but at the same time, you're respectful and polite. And that is a good professional brand to lead with when you're meeting people who don't already know you. Okay, using this strategy, it's really important not to expect a lot of responses and not to get caught up in the thinking that if you don't get responses, you're not doing it right. Or if you don't get responses, it's not having any value. Keep in mind that when you send these things out, even if people don't respond to you, they're still getting you into their psyche, and they never would have if you hadn't done this. So these people that you've reached out to, that you've targeted, are going to start remembering your name. And if they do have a need, they might think, there's this person, and they sent me this email, and I didn't look at it at the time, but I know it's probably in my archives, and they sent a resume. And you know what? They sent a resume by snail mail too. I think I have it somewhere. I threw it on a file. Let me see if they're still available. So you may get nothing, and then you get something. And I can tell you from personal experience as a coach, I have an email list, and I've been coaching for 22 years. So I have people who have been on my email list for over 2 decades, and they get my emails, and they don't respond to my emails because my emails aren't asking for a response. I send out a video, or I send out an announcement about a workshop. I send out this or that. I try to send out valuable content. I try not to send out too much content, but I send out enough so people know what I'm up to. And I have people all the time reaching out to me, even if we haven't talked in 5 years, and saying, Nahid, I would like to work with you now. So because they've been getting the emails and they have a sense for how I can help them. But they didn't need the help when they got the email, but then later they did. And because I've been doing that consistently, I have a consistent pipeline of people who call me either for themselves or who are referred by someone in my network, just because I consistently communicate, but I don't demand responses, because people might not need me when I send something out. That's what you're doing. It has tons of value. So please don't get discouraged if you get 0 responses. But at the same time, if you get a response, you want to be prepared. So let's talk about how to prepare. You are asking for a meeting in all of your communication. The purpose of the meeting is for you to introduce yourself, to get to know them a little bit, and to leave behind contact information like a resume or a portfolio, so that they know to reach out to you if something ever comes up. And you're actually asking them, do you see a potential for me to be a fit in your team now or in the future? And you may not. It may just be a discovery meeting, and you may realize that you're not a fit at all. And that's also okay, because they may start thinking of other places, either in their organization or through other people they know, where you might be a fit, because they're still going to appreciate your approach. All right. Since this meeting is not an interview, what's really important to understand is you shouldn't treat it like an interview. So you should come not prepared like you would prepare for an interview, but prepared in a different way. It's your responsibility to run the meeting. The meeting should not be very long. You should plan on 10 to 20 minutes max. How are you going to come prepared? You should come prepared with 3 things. A very short presentation. Your why, related to why you chose this person to visit, so they know why you chose them, and some questions to get them talking about their goals and needs. Your presentation should be a quick overview of who you are and why you decided to reach out. So, for example, you could briefly highlight your education in 1 bullet, your work experience, no more than 3 bullets, and why you're there in 1 bullet. So we're talking 5-bullet presentation. I'm a leadership coach. I have my background in business and psychology. I've been working for more than 22 years, coaching leaders, business owners, and people in transition. And I help them more effectively deal with the situations that are in front of them. And I also help coach them to become better versions of themselves, to grow more confident and more effective in their work. I came to you because this organization sounds like there's a focus on having a coaching culture, and you may need some leadership coaches either now or at some point in the future. I wanted to introduce myself and see if we could be a good fit. Okay. Now, don't turn it into an interview or a sales pitch. Just be clear and then move into a natural conversation. Once you're done with your short overview, you can say a little bit more about why you chose them. Now, I just actually said why I chose them in my little initial pitch. So then if you did it that way, you might just completely skip this step, but you might want to spend a little bit more time saying, hey, this is why I reached out to you. I wanted to be proactive in my career search and identify companies I think would be a good fit instead of just responding to job postings. I chose your company because I did a search of companies and I was looking for companies that were relatively close to where I live so that I could come visit them in person. And so that I could, if I did get hired, I could do at least a hybrid job where I was in the office a couple of times a week. But I also chose your company because you're in this particular field, or because I read some things about your culture and they sound right in line with my values. And you might give a couple of examples about that. Again, you're just being very honest about this is how I found you. And this is what I'm thinking as I found you and I chose your company. That authenticity is really disarming and it helps people really feel good about why you chose them. Then what you want to do very quickly is get them talking because they're not going to be very engaged in the conversation unless they're the ones to be doing the talking. In any conversation, the person doing the listening has more power. That's why you want your part of it to be relatively brief, very polished, but relatively brief. And then you go in genuinely curious and you try to get them talking. And here are some things that you can say. Do you mind if I ask you some questions that I couldn't discover through my research? Do you mind telling me a little bit more about how you run your team? What do you look for in team members when you are in hiring mode? What are the current challenges you're facing? From what I've shared so far, do you see a way I might fit in or someone like me might fit in either now or in the future? Any additional questions for me? So these are all questions that you can use to get them talking, and you can listen and turn it into a natural conversation. Now watch the time. It's really important, even if you get in with someone who talks a lot, if they talk to you for a half hour or an hour, you may think, wow, I'm in. But it's really important for you to respect their time. And I have known people to go in and be the one talking most of the time and still come out and complain that the meeting was supposed to be short and it ended up being longer. So you don't want to run into that problem. So in order to not run into that problem, you want to make sure that you're keeping time. And around the 20-minute mark, you want to say, hey, I just want to do a time check. I told you that I would be 10 to 20 minutes. It's around 20 minutes now. I definitely have more time. I'm loving this conversation. Would love to talk more if you're available, but I also want to respect your time and check in with you and kind of see where you are on this. That way you're showing that you're time conscious, that you can be succinct. And again, you're showing respect. At the end, you want to ask if you can follow up. The reason you want to ask if you can follow up is, remember, they're under no obligation to do anything after the meeting. They might, after you meet with them, say, hey, I'll get back to you. Maybe I can use you sometime. And then you never hear from them again. Or they might say, hey, I have someone else you can talk to. I might give you the contact information. Or they might say, let me get you the contact information. So you always want to ask if you can follow up. That way you have their permission to keep that conversation going. And now you've elevated them from that sort of cold calling routine to a different keep in touch routine that enables you to reach out to them maybe every month or so in a very different way. And you can come up with a list of kinds of things that you might reach out to them. So if they've promised you something, you can reach out and check in with them on that. You might run into an article and you might want to forward it to them and say, hey, thought you might be interested. Or you might just want to reach out every month or so and say, hey, just wanted to check in. How are you doing? Here's how things are going with me right now. Something like that. What can this process accomplish for you, even if you don't get a lot of response? Even if you get, let's say, 2 meetings and those meetings don't go anywhere. Even if you get 0 responses, you know that your resume is in the hands of people who would otherwise not know you exist, and that's pretty valuable. Because you reached out consistently over time, your name will be familiar even if they don't remember why. And let's say later you apply for a job, your resume will be more likely to be looked at because they go, wait a minute, this person's name sounds familiar. Because you were polite and respectful and not overly salesy in your reach outs, this will establish your brand as assertive yet professional. And you're branding yourself in your industry or in the realm of people that you want to know during your career. And that brand is a very appealing brand. You might get a meeting or 2 out of your efforts, and these might lead to good jobs. So it's very likely that if someone does pick up the phone and call you and ask you in, they might have something in the back of their mind. They might not let on, so they might be informally interviewing you, even though I told you this is not an interview. So your process has to be clean and succinct, the way you go through your presentation, but they might start asking you questions. So you want to be prepared for that too. And you never know. You may leave that room with a job offer, or you may leave that room with an invitation to talk to HR and go through an official job process or something like that. All right, I know that this process takes courage, but the process does take courage. And if you go through it, you end up developing your confidence because you're doing very brave things. I think I said in another video that Tony Robbins once said that success really has 3 components. 1 is knowing what you want, 2 is taking massive action, and 3 is sometimes getting a little bit lucky. So this is part of your massive action. You may get no responses, you may get a few responses, but regardless of what you do, you're putting yourself out there and you're planting seeds, and some of those seeds are going to grow. Not all of them, but some of them, and you don't need a lot of them to grow. You only need a few of them to grow into opportunities. And what you're doing is something that will really, really shape your career, if not in the very, very short term, definitely in the next few months and in the next few years for sure. Okay, why don't more people do this? Well, it can feel awkward and scary, and I can tell you that I've worked with several people on this process. Some of them have taken to it, and they've done really well with it, and a lot of them have gotten responses right away and been very positively surprised. Others have sort of agreed with me that it's a good idea, and they just couldn't bring themselves to do it, and that's okay. I think it's important to understand that sometimes things like this are a little bit too scary and too awkward and uncomfortable. But even just watching this video and thinking about it, you might be starting to think about yourself differently, and you might be starting to think about your job search differently, and you might be starting to think about the hidden job market. So it might slightly change your approach, and that could be in your favor. I think another reason that people don't do this is because they misinterpret no response as rejection. Now, none of us like rejection. Rejection hurts, and none of us want to be rejected. And I don't care how confident you are, rejection always hurts. I think there's a book I had to read for a book club about getting used to rejection, where the author got himself rejected 100 times on purpose so that he could get more comfortable rejecting. He just started asking people really crazy things, and even doing that, he didn't get rejected sometimes, which was kind of fun. But his whole MO was, I have to get comfortable with rejection so that I can get comfortable putting myself out there. Keep in mind that no response is not a rejection here. You are partly branding yourself. And if you don't expect a response, you'll be pleasantly surprised when you get one. And the thing is, if they're not responding to you, you're not in any kind of an awkward or uncomfortable position. If you call, for example, the chance that you get someone's voicemail is 99%. So 99%, you're going to have a voicemail script in front of you that you're just reading. And in that 1% that you actually get that person live, you'll be prepared because you'll have a script ready to go and you know exactly what you want to say. So as long as you're prepared for every step down the line, it doesn't have to be scary. And the other thing is I guess it's a little bit of fear of success. Like people are like, whoa, what if people do invite me in for a meeting? I don't think I can deal with, going in and having that meeting if it's not a formal interview. So you want to make sure that you're just really prepared for that. And of course, if you need help with this, going through this process, I've coached lots of people through it. Please reach out to me. But I also have workshops on transition tools, and other things on the website. You can sign up for the email list or subscribe to our channel, and you will definitely have the resources you can to be supported through this process. The bottom line here is taking control of your career builds confidence and gives you an edge, even if nothing happens at first. So I encourage you to try some of this, even if you're a little scared to do all of it. And if you're not scared and you're feeling like, let's do this, please reach out to me and tell me how it went. I'd love to hear from you. All right, subscribe to our channel if you haven't. I'm making lots of transition videos right now and would love to have you see all of them. Talk soon.